This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now, today we have an exclusive interview with Palestinian resistance icon Leila Khalid, who is in South Africa to raise funds for Palestine. Nigeria's election has been postponed amid criticism from the West. And if we have time a little bit later, we'll look back at Ivory Coast's marvellous AFCON win last night. But first, let's get the day's news from Katrine Milan.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's just take a look at those top stories this morning. Pupils at more than 140 schools have yet to start schooling this year as the shutdown of services in Malamulele enters the fifth week. Residents have resolved to continue with protest action in demand of their own municipality. In the past 4 weeks, 4 schools and a government warehouse were torched. The Malamulele task team is expected to make submissions to the Municipal Demarcation Board within 21 days. Meanwhile, at a separate rally to celebrate the ANC's 103rd anniversary celebrations at Tembisa on Gauteng's East Rand yesterday, ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte warned that the party will not be bullied by those who use violent protests to establish their own municipalities.
People who want their own municipality and they burn 4 schools and close the roads are lost, comrades, and they need help. They need to be talked to come to their senses.
Moving to Africa, international powers have expressed concern at the postponement of Nigeria's presidential election until the 28th of March, warning that government should not use security concerns as a pretext for delaying the democratic process. The decision comes as an effort to have better control on a jihadist group, Boko Haram. Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy and most populous country, and the fate of its democracy is hugely important for the rest of Africa. Egypt has indefinitely suspended its football league after 22 fans died in a stampede at a stadium in Cairo. Many of the victims were crushed after police fired tear gas at supporters of Zamalek Football Club. Soccer matches are often a flashpoint for violence in Egypt. In 2012, 72 fans were killed at a match in Port Said. Since then, Egypt has curbed the number of people allowed to attend, and supporters have often tried to storm stadiums they are banned from entering. And Ivory Coast were crowned African champions after beating Ghana 9-8 in a penalty shootout in the Africa Cup of Nations final in Bata, Equatorial Guinea Sunday. It was Ivory Coast's second continental title and almost a repeat of the 1992 final when they defeated Ghana on penalties in Dakar, Senegal, when the shootout ended 11-10.
Champions of 2015, Yaya Toure has finally claimed a major title with Côte d'Ivoire, one of the remaining golden generation, against to raise this trophy aloft. Gold medals galore.
Well, there you have it. You can find all those top stories and more all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can then also keep up to date. Follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you, Katrine. Palestinian resistance icon Leila Khalid is in South Africa. In 1969, Khalid made history by becoming the first woman to hijack an airplane. She was only 25 years old at the time. She was later released in a prisoner exchange deal. Khalid is a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and currently lives in Amman, Jordan. She will be delivering several lectures and will be the guest of honor at a Boycott, Divestment and Sanction South Africa, that's BDS dinner, where she'll be part of a special fundraising effort in aid of Palestine. A lot of controversy surrounded the announcement of Khalid's planned visit here. Groups like the South African Jewish Board of Deputies labelled her a terrorist who's not welcome here in our country. But Khalid has been officially welcomed in the country by the government and joins us now live in our Port Elizabeth studio this morning. A very good morning to you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It's not the first visit. You visited South Africa before. You've met with Nelson Mandela when you were here in South Africa. What do you make of the controversy that now surrounds your visit to South Africa?
You know, in every event, some people dislike it. But we have to see whether this is the majority or the minority. I have been welcomed by the people, by the government, by parliamentarians. This means that this visit is on the right track, and it helps a lot our comrades, our friends, to go for their goals of the BDS and extending solidarity to the Palestinian people. And those minorities, sometimes they find that they are isolated in the society in general. So let them speak. We are in a country who has freedom of speech to anyone. But a time will come when they will discover that we are on the right track and they are on the wrong track.
Let's move on to your visit to South Africa. Just tell us a little bit about your itinerary, what you'll be doing over the next week or so.
I'll be going to Durban, to Cape Town, to help BDS, promote BDS. And up till now, the visit is successful because more people are joining and want to help through this movement and through other organizations or committees expressing their solidarity to the Palestinians. We know very well that people in South Africa feel with those people who are still living under oppression, under occupation like the Palestinian people, and they extend their hands to help and to support. So it's not weird that I'm on a visit for the help of my people through BDS. That's why I'm calling everybody to join this peaceful movement, because it's not the first time in history that BDS campaigns are used to face the oppressors anywhere in the world. But I have to remind that during the apartheid system in South Africa, the whole world boycotted and isolated that hideous regime. And it helped the struggle of the people of South Africa to gain their independence and to end that regime. And it ended. This experience has been experienced by the world, and according to the pressure of the people in all continents, the governments changed their minds finally, and they isolated that regime, except for Israel and the United States. But at the end of the day, and after a long way to freedom, as Nelson Mandela said, the people of South Africa now is living in dignity with democracy and extending their support to those who are suffering now like they suffered before, because only those who suffer feel with each other.
I wanted to ask you a little bit to give us the historical context of the relationship between South Africa and Palestine, the battles fought and won together in the past, and maybe tell us about the relationship today.
And the relation was because we both people were facing apartheid. You end apartheid in South Africa, but we didn't up till now. And it's not only apartheid system, but also occupation and keeping the refugees outside of their homeland and neglecting I mean Israel, neglecting the rights of the Palestinians to be back to their homelands and villages, according to the United Nations resolution 194, which calls Israel to accept the return of the Palestinians who were driven out by force in 1948, and also according to the all resolutions to the Palestinian cause taken in the United Nations. But Israel denies all these resolutions because it considers itself upon the international law. And this by itself, the people of South Africa, their organizations, ANC and unions, COSATU, now youth organizations, women organizations, we had this relation before, but now it's more deep and it's going on, and we in every excursion Israel does against our people, like what happened through the past 6 years that Israel launched war against Gaza, and the last one last year was devastating, and it was a Holocaust. So the people of South Africa are aware of the injustice that Israel is doing for us, and the violations and the killing and this brutal policy against the Palestinians. They feel it because they know it. And I'm happy that I'm seeing the new generation is very enthusiastic, and they create new methods for showing and extending solidarity to the Palestinian people.
I want to take you back to the siege on Gaza last year. We have a relief organization in South Africa called the Gift of the Givers. They worked in Gaza, and they reported some terrible crimes against humanity that were reported. I've got the founder of the Gift of the Givers, who I spoke to recently. I just want you to look at a little piece of the interview and then get your reaction to what he said as to what happened in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. One lady that I work with has been to South Africa. She is doing the distribution for me on my behalf. In the last week, I told her, Allah, how's it going with the distribution? She said the first few days was fine, but now it's very difficult. I said, why? She said, Khadija went around to give out food to the people, as you asked. I said, who is Khadija? She said, Khadija works with us. So I said, what happened? She said she had a big yellow shirt on, big bright light saying humanitarian worker. She went in an ambulance. She was giving out food, and Israel struck the ambulance directly. So I said, what happened to Khadija? She said she's dead. So she said, like this, so many of our workers have been targeted. Yeah. So it becomes very complicated. We even said, as a backup, we will use the UN school to put up a field hospital inside the UN school. How many schools have been targeted?
The UN school has been bombed overnight.
There's no security. It seems. And the hospital, Al-Shifa, we had worked there before. That thing got hit. So where do you put the people?
There you have the founder of the Gift of the Givers talking about aid workers being targeted and shot and bombed, children, schools, women being targeted. Are these crimes against humanity? And do you expect international organizations like the ICC, like the UN, to step in and do something about this?
You know, we have been to the United Nations last month, asking the whole world to put end to this occupation. But the answer was no, because there is the United States waiting to put the veto. This time they voted no, because they knew that we cannot get a resolution. Anyhow, what this organization, the working in Gaza, this is not the first time we know about it. I have met some of its members here and there. In Lebanon in 2006, when the war broke out, they were there also. And this shows the spirit and the understanding of the people of South Africa, that they go directly to where there is danger even, they go there and they extend, give help to the people. Now, these war crimes, up till now, Israel hasn't been punished. That's why when we call for BDS as a means to follow up Israel, to put sanctions, and then to take them to the courts, international courts. Now, PLO signed the Declaration of Rome, which is including the ICC, and we are going there to charge Israel internationally. And I think now there is a big support for this step from our people and from our friends all over the world. We will wait and see. Now the Zionists are working, and the imperialists also, especially the Americans, are working to stop ICC from being, maybe they are thinking that to stop its work. They would say, make excuses that it has no work after what happened, and that's it. Let's stop this issue. But we insist that we will take those war criminals to the court and charge them. This is one of the means of facing this hideous apartheid state in our country.
Last week at the African Union Summit, African Union leaders made a resolution that they would step out of the International Criminal Court because they feel African leaders are the only ones being targeted by this court. How do you view this, and how do you view the decision by the African Union to think about going this route?
I think this is, some countries are pressured by the United States to take this step, and then they will move another step to go for other countries to take the same attitude. I think it's very dangerous to stop a court where people were under oppression. They were killed, massacres, like what happened in Rwanda, for example, and what happened in Kosovo, the same. And they were taken to ICC and be charged. But we know that it's more for Africa, but it doesn't mean that the African governments should accept that anyone who makes war crimes shouldn't be punished. I don't agree with it, but I think that they have their reasons for it. I understand it, but I don't accept it.
I want to come back to your arrival here in South Africa now on Friday morning. You met with struggle stalwart Ahmed Kathrada, and over the years you've had wonderful relations with other icons like Nelson Mandela. Can you tell us about the welcome you received, and maybe give us a little insight into your relationship with Nelson Mandela?
You know, anyone in this world considered Nelson Mandela as his own hero, because he is the hero of the struggle against apartheid. And Nelson Mandela did not mean that he is only a freedom fighter for his people, but for all peoples of the world who are suffering from oppression. In our with our people, they all know his saying that the freedom of South Africa will be incomplete until the Palestinians get their freedom. This is a vision, a political vision to us, and it meant a lot. It was a message to the people of South Africa that you have to extend your solidarity in different means for those people who are still suffering under occupation. That's why we look, it was very sad for us to lose such a hero, such an icon, that we all read his book about the long way to freedom. This gave us more strength that those people who were suffering from apartheid, they struggled, sacrificed, and went to jails for years and years. Now we have prisoners in Israeli jails now passing 33 years in jail. They exceeded what the apartheid regime did in South Africa. I mean the Israelis, putting people in jail the same way. But with learning from this struggle of the people of South Africa, gave us hope and the will and the strength. And still the relation is going on, and we have good ties with different groups, including the government also, that we are still looking forward for more higher steps from South Africa. I think if Nelson Mandela was still alive or is still the president, he would have taken steps higher than just BDS on the popular level. I think he will ask the government to cut ties on the diplomatic level, and like Venezuela, for example, and Bolivia, they sent the ambassadors, the Israeli ambassadors, and they cut diplomatic ties, and also on the economical level. And this is the practical attitude, I mean, to move the attitude from its political level to its practical level. And I think one day we'll hear that the government in South Africa will do that. We expect it.
This week, this week on Wednesday, the 11th of February, South Africa will celebrate 25 years when Nelson Mandela was released from prison on that day. Can you tell us where were you on that day when you heard when he was released, and maybe tell us the emotions that you experienced on that day?
You know, when I was living in Syria at that time, sorry, we were celebrating his release also, because as I told you, we considered Nelson Mandela is for all of us, and for peace lovers, for those who are still struggling, for those who are still suffering. You go to our offices everywhere, you see photos of Nelson Mandela on the walls of our offices. It shows that a prison cannot be closed forever on prisoners. Our prisoners in Israeli jails, they were singing, dancing in their cells, and telling the Israelis, your end is the same as the end of the apartheid. They told them this, and they were put in isolation, those who celebrated the release of Nelson Mandela. I'm sure that every prisoner in Israeli jail look upon this experience, that in spite of the long terms that they spend in, they are spending in jails, that look what happened. They were isolated in Robben Island, and yet they were released, and they were victorious when they went out from prison. So this gives also our prisoners who are sentenced for not only for life for once, for life 4 times plus 100 years. Imagine. Now, this, they want to, of course, nobody will live for hundreds of years. But this gave those prisoners, not only in Israeli jails, but in other jails in the world, for political activists, that one day they will break the doors of the jails with the help of their people and be free.
A final question, ma'am, but what would you consider as the minimum conditions for a negotiated settlement in Palestine?
let me tell you, apartheid regime in South Africa took 4 years when they began to negotiate Nelson Mandela in prison. But on parallel, the struggle was escalating. And by the isolation of that regime from the whole world, except for Israel and the United States, they were obliged to go for negotiations and accept the conditions of the ANC at that time. In our case, since 21 years, the Palestinians, our leadership signed Oslo Accords with Israel. Israel denied most of its items and behaved the other way and not committed to any item of this accord. Even Sharon himself in 2001, and those accords were signed in 1993 sponsored by the Americans in the White House, where Arafat went and signed that treaty, that agreement. Israel went on with its policy the same thing, as if nothing happened. They did not release all prisoners, still building settlements, confiscating land, put more people in prison, assassinating our leaders like Abu Ali Mustafa, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Rantisi, these names, and still going on the same policy. They did not change. And they denied a Palestinian state and Jerusalem as its capital. They deny our right for return. They deny our right for self-determination. Now, after 21 years, is it possible to go with this failure again, to go to negotiate? We learned from the negotiations of the Vietnamese when the Americans were bombing all Vietnam. They used to go to Paris to meet them. The first point on the agenda of the meeting at that time, that the withdrawal of the Americans. When the Americans refused, they said, okay, we meet you on the ground there. And they were obliged to leave, and the Americans fled Vietnam afterwards. This is the way to oblige the occupant, the war criminals, the apartheid system, to oblige them and not to beg them to go to negotiations. We have been doing that, and this is the result now. More excursions against our people. They are putting 1,800,000 people in Gaza in a big jail for 8 years now. And now it's all totally closed upon them. What do you expect from that? I'm not asking you. I'm just saying that don't except one choice for us is resistance. And resistance by all means, including armed struggle. This is the only way that we can liberate our land Without that, I will remind the audience 2 months ago, and less than 2 months, a minister called Ziad Abu Ain was rallying with going to the land to plant olive trees that the Israelis cut from the Palestinian land, and they killed him in front of all the cameras. What happened? Nobody was charged for it. Where can we charge these people? It's always with the help of others, and going to the International Criminal Court to charge those people. And negotiations now is not for, we cannot get anything out of it. There are Oslo Accords and nothing was implemented. Because Israel, as I said, just give me 1 second, considers itself above international law. Daily, they violate international. They don't care about international law because they are backed by United States and many other countries. That's why we are calling to widen the BDS campaigns everywhere in the world.
Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Palestinian resistance icon Leila Khaled. She's in South Africa with the BDS campaign to raise funds for Palestine. But let's have a look at what you say about this. How do you view this? How do you view the conflict? Mr. Abdullah Vahid says, Durban, are you ready for hashtag Leila Khaled? Yes, she'll be in Durban tomorrow. Actually, in Durban later today, I've been told. Leila Khaled, icon of the Palestinian struggle. We, the South African youth, are inspired by you and your determination. That one from Nabila Suji. There you have a picture. I think that's an arrival picture. Activist Leila Khaled, ISIS terrorists and far Israel are all the same. That one from, is it Rujda Maharaj? Anyhow, today's picture, the picture of the day, changing focus now, comes from the Arminator. Captioned, congrats to the Elephants for winning the Africa Cup of Nations. One love, he says. Yeah, it's been a kind of landmark day for Yaya Toure, who lifted the coveted African trophy last night. Let's now take a look at what's happening elsewhere in the country today. Now, here in Johannesburg, Boksburg's Magistrates Court former Grand Slam tennis champion Bob Hewitt will stand trial on 2 charges of rape and 1 of indecent assault. We stay in the city of Gold. Josie FM DJ Donald Sebolai, who is accused of stabbing his girlfriend to death, will appear for trial in the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court in the capital Pretoria. International Relations Minister Maite Nkwane Mashabane will brief the media on the outcomes of the recent AU summit. And in Brits, Water Affairs Minister Nomvula Mokonyane is expected to brief the media on the recent protests in Majakaneng relating to water challenges in the area. Now we'd like to congratulate South African-born, Melbourne-based composer and flutist Wouter Kellerman, who has won a Grammy at the Grammy Awards. Kellerman's collaborative effort with Indian composer and producer Ricky Cage, Winds of Samsara, took the Best New Age Album of the Year award at the Grammys. The news was revealed as part of the earlier announced winners prior to the main ceremony.
This week we are taking you around the continent, telling you stories about what makes Africa, Africa.
We now head to the Kenyan coast, where we meet a man using needles to fight a growing drug culture.
A recent study revealed that there are 850 drug addicts in Diani alone, with over 220 using injectable drugs such as heroin.
In my community, I've seen a lot of these people suffer.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Hello and welcome back. You're with the Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just take a look at the top stories this morning. Pupils at more than 140 schools have yet to start schooling this year as the shutdown of services in Malamulele enters a 5th week. Residents have resolved to continue with protest action in demand for their own municipality. In the past 4 weeks, 4 schools and a government warehouse were torched. The Malamulele task team is expected to make submissions to the Municipal Demarcation Board within 21 days. Meanwhile, at a rally to celebrate the ANC's 103rd anniversary celebrations at Tembisa on Gauteng's East Rand yesterday, ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte warned that the party will not be bullied by those who use violent protests to establish their own municipalities. International powers have expressed concern at the postponement of Nigeria's presidential election until the 28th of March, warning that government should not use security concerns as a pretext for delaying the democratic process. The decision comes as an effort to have better control on jihadist group Boko Haram. Nigeria is Africa's biggest economy and most populous country, and the fate of its democracy is hugely important for the rest of Africa. And Ivory Coast were crowned African champions after beating Ghana 9-8 in a penalty shootout in the Africa Cup of Nations final in Bata, Equatorial Guinea yesterday. It was Ivory Coast's second continental title and almost a repeat of the 1992 final when they defeated Ghana on penalties in Dakar, Senegal, when the shootout ended in 11-10. I remember all those top stories and more are all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can then also keep up to date on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Well, Evan, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Katrina. Boko Haram's latest victim appears to be the Nigerian presidential election. The February 14th presidential election, that's later this week, has been postponed by 6 weeks now because of security fears and will only take place on the 28th of March. Nigeria's security services say they need at least 6 weeks to launch a major offensive against Boko Haram to ensure safety during that election period. These elections are widely expected to be Nigeria's closest electoral contest yet, and economists and world leaders are keeping a close eye on Africa's biggest economy. Today, we take a look at Nigeria from a political as well as an economic angle, and joining us on the political front is political analyst Lisa Otto, who joins us in our studio in Pretoria. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
And then here in Johannesburg, we're joined by Dr. Martin Davies, the CEO of Frontier Advisory, who will be taking a look at Nigeria's 2015 economic outlook. Very good morning to you too, Dr. Davies.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
If I can start with the politics, seeing that we've had these latest developments now very quickly. Lisa, if I can ask you just to give us your response to this election now being postponed in order for major offensives to be launched against Boko Haram. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that it's an issue that's been delayed. They've left it until the very week of the election, and there's already been some concerns around the National Electoral Commission's preparedness for this election. And having said that, I think we need to bear in mind that there has been a state of emergency in Nigeria with respect to Boko Haram for nearly 2 years now. And within that period, the country's forces have not been successful in being able to quell the group. And one is hard-pressed to believe that another 6 weeks will enable them to do that.
Do you think the likes of Chad and Cameroon are now going to step up their campaigns along with the Nigerian government to quell the northeast of the country?
Well, certainly bordering countries' forces have already been involved given the threat that has been in the border regions posed by Boko Haram. And of course, we've also learnt now that the African Union would like to send in troops, a force 7,500 men strong. Although analysts are suggesting that that will be insufficient in itself to deal with the group, even as an addition to Nigerian forces. And again, 6 weeks does not seem like a sufficient period of time within which to tackle this problem, given that Boko Haram seems to have stepped up its efforts since the beginning of the year, and several intelligence reports that the government had received prior to attacks have not been acted on. So I'm not really confident that this is going to render the kind of results that the government would suggest.
Let's come to the economic side of the ball, as it were, or the coin, as it were. How do you view this, and how does the how's the economy going to view this postponement? And then the ground offensives and the like that's supposedly going to follow in the weeks to come.
Well, definitely, it's deeply problematic. This could not have come at a worse time. Already we've seen that this year the Nigerian stock exchange is down 41%, the second worst performing in the world. Only Greece has performed worse this year, over the last 6 months at least, than what Nigeria has. The currency also has lost over a third of its value. Only Ukraine has done worse. It was announced last week by the Nigerian government, because of a significantly reduced oil prices, which account for approximately 95% of Nigeria's state revenue, or export revenue rather, that they're slashing capital expenditure for this year, 2015, by 90%, where they should be cutting the cost of an extremely sizable, very corrupt government, rather, or public sector. Rather, they're cutting cost of essential infrastructure, what Nigeria needs the most.
What does Nigeria then need, economically speaking, from this period and from the election itself going forward deep into 2015?
Well, again, there was argument, has this gone too far? Nigeria, and you talk about Chad, Niger, and neighboring countries, and this is, Nigeria is not so much a country as it is what I half-jokingly call an uncountry. It's the north, the Muslim north, which is largely under a state of emergency, as Lisa mentioned. It's a region that is largely anarchical. The south problems in the south were solved a few years ago, largely with buying off local politicians by the central government. I think the best case here, this is 6 weeks of continued market uncertainty. The best case for Nigeria, and this is not by any means a rosy case, but the best case is certainly a political change post-Goodluck Jonathan by the end of March. But do not assume the opposition are terribly that much better. It's a choice of the lesser of two evils through democratic process currently in Nigeria.
Lisa, if I can come to you and tap into that immediately. I want to talk about Goodluck Jonathan. It's going to be a very closely run thing, this election. How did you see the campaign that's gone on? He's even gone into the northeast once or twice, where he has very little support, it seems. How do you see this election? Is it going to be the end of Goodluck Jonathan, or do we see a future with Goodluck Jonathan very much in the picture?
Well, I think the election campaign has kind of avoided some of the bigger issues that one would consider to be important election issues, one of which has obviously been Boko Haram. One would expect that to be an issue that people are addressing for voters, but that's only really been brought up by the opposition, and President Goodluck Jonathan has left visiting these areas to kind of the very last moment within this kind of electoral period, knowing probably at that point that the elections were going to be postponed. There's a lot of contention around Goodluck Jonathan, whether he should have been allowed to stand for another term. And news reports coming from Nigeria suggest that at this stage it's too close to call. It is going to be a very, very close election. And of course we are kind of waiting with bated breath to see how the PDP, the ruling party, in an event of a loss at the polls, will respond to this, given that we've been in a democratic dispensation in Nigeria for the last 16 years. But prior to that, change of government tended to happen through military coups.
Is there a risk of the country being split even more along religious lines, north-south?
I think the country has always been split along religious lines. This has been a major factor in terms of the political culture of the country. And of course, we see that playing out in this election as well, because the APC candidate Buhari is a northerner, he is a Muslim, whereas President Jonathan is a southerner and a Christian. So you already see those kind of dividing lines playing out there. And this is an important issue. Of course, in Nigeria, there is a kind of unofficial policy that should see presidents representing a kind of rotational system coming from different regions of the country, and also representing the various religions, obviously with it being a largely Christian-Muslim divide. So I think this is nothing new, but it's certainly a fault line that exists within the Nigerian political landscape.
Well, thank you very much for joining us live from Pretoria today, political analyst and an expert on Nigeria, Lisa Otto. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
If I can conclude with you, Dr. Davies, just if you were doing business, if you were one of the big companies, say South African business, doing business in Nigeria. How do you assess risk now? How do you plot your way forward in Nigeria now?
Well, Nigeria is approaching 200 million people by 2050. It's forecast by The Economist magazine. Nigeria will have a bigger population than the United States. FMCG companies, consumer-facing enterprises, of course, this is the biggest country in Africa. This is a priority country for them. So think SABC Miller, think ShopRite, think Mr. Price. These are companies, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, MTN even. These are many of these countries' biggest markets, MTN particularly. Yeah. So, of course, it's an incredibly important market, despite all the political challenges, despite the internal instability. As Lisa mentioned, the religious fault line, cutting the country literally almost in half. The capital will chase demographics regardless of the risk. I think something which to mention on March 11th, we're hosting a Frontier Forum at the IDC, talking about the outlook of Nigeria, and exactly this, having leading South African companies to saying, well, what's next? Last year, the World Economic Forum in May, we were in Abuja. We hosted, it was the high point of Nigeria. Everyone was excited. Yeah. Elections are coming. The Boko Haram was on the rise once again. But things were saying we'll muster through. The tide has turned. Political change must take place. But regardless, I think, as I say, consumer-facing companies cannot ignore Nigeria, no matter what the risks and no matter how challenging that environment business is.
It's a question of navigating the tricky water and landscape that is Nigeria. Thank you, Dr. Davies, for joining us. That is the CEO of Frontier Advisory, Dr. Martin Davies, join us live here in our studio in Johannesburg talking about Nigeria. How do you do business in Nigeria, of course, ahead of an election? Let's have a look at some of your tweets. What are you talking about on Nigeria, mind you? Chikezi Paul Chisholm says, Nigeria elections, how long will it take Africa to shed its cloak of perpetual political entrenchment? Well, that's a very good question asked there by Chikezi. Kenny G says, regardless of any excuses, delaying the Nigeria elections just shows the incompetence of Jay Goodluck tweets. Boko Haram is not a new problem, he says. Unfortunately, Kenny, it seems as if lots of innocent people lose their lives. Mariam says Nigeria elections postponed. What are they thinking? They're thinking about saving lives, Mariam. That's what they are thinking. It's easy for us to sit outside the borders while thousands and thousands of families are being gunned down in their villages, being slaughtered by insurgents, using the elections as a springboard. But that's where we leave Nigeria for now. Let's move on to conclude. It's now 9:47. We've got about 5 minutes left or so to talk wetlands to Paul. Wetlands are among some of the most threatened aquatic habitats in South Africa, with almost 50% of the country's wetlands already lost to human activities. Ecologically, wetlands are of great significance as they regulate water quality and moderate water flow. In simpler terms, wetlands act as sponges during wet periods, thereby controlling the extent and impacts of flooding and drought. Now, our environmental guru, Mr. Greenfingers himself, Paul Tsietse Munari, is here to tell us more about the damage we are causing to our wetlands. Is that for real?
It is, and it's not just in South Africa. In South Africa, we've already almost lost, 52% or so. But all over the world, wetlands are just being destroyed, and development. People are building on top of them. People are building dams. People are building, apartment blocks. Yeah, so it is. People are mining them. Some of them in the eastern side of KwaZulu-Natal by St. Lucia. So it's not looking so good.
Mining the wetlands. What do you get out of a wetland?
Well, the thing about wetlands is that sometimes they just on top of like a nice coal seam, and then there's lots of peat underneath, and that's what people want. If you think about Mpumalanga, there's lots of coal there, and right next to where there's a big deposit of a coal deposit, there's just the wetland right next to it.
So we see the picture. This is the pictures we see running here, police around. It's a wetland, protected area, but this is what it does. It sort of filters all the water and cleans out the water. But how do these habitats, how do they develop and where are they found? Mostly coastal areas or not?
They actually found almost everywhere, and it's strange that you pick up such a strange place like a coastal area, because coastal areas like just by sea level, and it depends on the topography and also the height above sea level where wetlands come through. But you can find them almost everywhere. You've heard of swamps and bogs and all of those words. Those are basically wetlands, and usually where places where there's more rainfall than evaporation, so water does not really leave the soil that much. That's where you get wetlands, very close to rivers, and they also come in alluvial forms where a lot of these little streams come together. Yeah, so you can find wetlands just about anywhere.
Now, we had World Wetlands Day last week, Monday,
Yes,
Paul,
yes.
if I'm not mistaken. I remember back because I had somebody in studio to talk about World Wetlands Day. What's the sort of outcomes from there, and what do we, the people in the street, need to know or need to focus on if the question pops up?
It's just basically raising awareness. Wetlands are not, a lot of people think of wetlands as the double Ds or the 4 Ds actually, No, not the, no, yeah. The ones, the ones to do with, disease.
Disease? Yes, disease, carry on. Well, take it out of the gutter there.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. Now it completely slipped my mind.
The 4 Ds.
Yes, the 4 Ds. And it has to do with disease, disaster. Lots of damage, and forgot the last one. But anyway, the point is, it's not that anymore.
You got your eye on the prize here.
My eye is completely here. But it's because, we have to raise awareness. Those things are really, really good for habitat, especially for plants and for animals, and they're also really good to keep soil together. It protects against the soil erosion and also water flow as well. When there's a heavy downpour, in a wetland, a lot of water gets trapped in because of the vegetation there, and also because of the type of the soil that you find there. So it keeps a lot of water before it just rushes down into the ocean or wherever it might go. So we're trying to raise awareness. We're trying to get people to know that, wetlands are really important. We need those for fresh water as well.
Quickly, final question. And I don't make it 4 minutes like my first final question. Just 30 seconds. Once it's damaged, can it be restored? And how can people help restoring wetlands?
Yeah, that's the difficult part as well. Because it works on a sort of a filtering process. So once it's damaged, the damage does not just stay on surface level. It goes underneath as well. So it takes quite a long time to restore it. But people can. First of all, stop polluting. That's number one.
Yeah.
Stop building on top of or mining by wetlands. That's big things that we need to protect.
That's not us, the men and women in the street. We don't do the mining and that sort of stuff. But we should maybe write a letter there.
But we need mines. Normal men on the street, we need mines for economy to progress. So if we don't support mines, then mines will never be built by big businesses, and they will never destroy wetlands, and we'll have a beautiful planet to live on.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. At least there's a little bit of hope for all of us. We should all chip in. We should all try and save our environment, small little bits at a time, because we are in peril on this planet. If you didn't know it, Newsroom on SABC. Broadcast live from our studios. We're going to leave you with Voter Kellerman, who won the Grammy last night, or the pre-award last night. Voter Kellerman. Of course, we broadcast live to you every morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon. We broadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also live on YouTube right now. Available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.
but